Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles, and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are not really about the money. Rather, they are actually more about the emotions associated with your finances. We may be somewhat general in our discussion, but we would love to hear from you to make it more personal and relevant. Call in, or you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, or you can post comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or any of the platforms that you might be listening to us on. So I find that many of my clients do not always know the process that they are about to embark on as they start their divorce. Sometimes clients have this feeling something's not right or something's missing. Maybe it's that something's changed, or all of a sudden they're hearing comments from their spouse that there's no money available and they've never heard these kind of comments before. I have experienced also where clients see a marital balance sheet and their gut response is, I could have sworn there was more money, more savings, more retirement, whatever it might be. Usually one spouse manages the finances in the family and the other spouse does the other responsibilities, or many of them. And they don't even know always whether the assets being declared are reasonable because they've always relied on the spouse to do their finances. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that every divorce has a spouse trying to hide money. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that every divorce is personal and it's different. And it is always important to communicate properly with your attorney and your professional team. When it comes to hidden assets or something specific like that, even more important to communicate your thoughts, and don't expect that your professionals are going to figure it out if you already have that suspicion. I have had the privilege of being on a roundtable discussion with our guest today and have presented on a panel discussion. And I am excited to have Michael Graven on the show today. He is a partner with Harrison & Held. He is a CPA. He thinking about all the things. I'm going to limit them because there's a tremendous amount that you have accomplished. But one of the things I love, I've had them on the show. You were president of the Lilac Tree, and a big fan of theirs, a nonprofit in Chicago that helps people through divorce as well. And Michael, I'm not going to spend half the show on your accomplishments. What I'd rather do is just jump in and have others find out why I'm a big fan of yours. So I'm going to ask you to help us kind of explore the beginning of the process, as well as kind of how to uncover or discover maybe whether there are hidden assets. So welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hirsch, excuse me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. You and I have talked about so many different topics over the course of years that connect the financial world and the divorce world, and they definitely interconnect. And you've said just in your introduction a couple important points that I 100% agree with. Divorce is about a lot of different things, but emotions are huge. And it plays a very big part in it. So I'm glad to be here and to talk more about it.
Yeah. As I say to every client of mine, emotions can be the most expensive part of your divorce. So keep them in check. And that's not easy, I will say. But I will say this, too often they hire a divorce attorney and they think, oh, we have a panacea of all ills because we've hired a competent professional. So the first thing I'd like to do with you is kind of clarify this a little bit. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more about what you do and the role of the divorce attorney, but also a little bit, if you would, on the importance and responsibilities of what the client needs to do as well.
You know, it's an excellent point. And I do think a lot of people go into the process thinking, okay, I'm just going to hand this over to my divorce attorney and they're going to take care of everything. And we do take care of a lot, but it is absolutely a collaboration. And just like anything in life, people have to advocate for themselves. Doctors aren't always right. Your teachers aren't always right. Your parents aren't always right. And your lawyers certainly aren't always right. And, you know, there are good lawyers and bad lawyers, and I don't necessarily mean it with respect to their competency level, but there are lawyers that that do take over a case and they're considering more what they view as the outcome versus what their client believes that the outcome ought to be. So, I'm a big believer in clients participating. I certainly welcome questions from them. I engage my clients often to tell me, their story. Often it's a narrative. I just listen. I gather up a lot of information, and a lot of that information we'll talk about later in the show, I believe, on discovering hidden assets. But what clients want is important. And for me, one of the biggest things I try to do is help clients prioritize. I don't feel like I need to make the decisions on behalf of my clients. My clients are generally well educated, smart enough to know what they want and where they're going. I just help them make that decision. I give them the information they need to vet all of their decisions. So I try to help them prioritize. We talk about the case, we talk about the different issues, and then they have to tell me, whether it's directly saying this is the most important thing to me, or me figuring it out through a series of questions and conversations, help them kind of plan how we're going to get from point A to point B being the end of a result that's good for them. So just like life, litigation is.
I will tell you, I love so much of what you said, because my approach, as you know, is prioritize, organize, simplify. And if you don't know what the priorities are, how are you going to organize around that and simplify it and get more of what you want? That's number one. Number two is the thing that I always love, like you get a service out there and then they send you a survey. How did we do? And they are shooting in the dark because they never set any expectations. They just answer the phone and answer the question. They didn't set any expectations when you went through the service. I think it's the same in this. If you don't tell your attorney what do you think is important, how can they advocate for you? If you don't tell them what you are thinking, what you want, or what is available and all the things that you covered, then you can't expect your attorney to be the best advocate for you, because they are going off the general as opposed to your specific situation. So communicating, as I mentioned earlier, is so vitally important. Those expectations, what is your priorities and what are you willing to give up? What do you need? All these things are just vitally, vitally important. And I think everyone has their own approach. Everyone has their own style. I know that, in the financial coaching world, I'm sure there are people that do it differently to me. Can you talk a little bit about how you get the process started with a new client, and how do you kind of acclimate them to what's going to come down the road?
Well, I think I start the process by, it always starts with a conversation. And you have clients at a lot of different stages of where they're going. Some are just inquiring and they're not ready to proceed. I have that a lot. I have people who I talk to and then they call me literally years later, or they might check in every year or two, but they're not ready to go. I have two clients right now that they actually not just talked to me, but hired me and then weren't ready to proceed for 3 years.
Wow.
1 3 years, 1 2.5 years. And they just, I was just there for when they needed me. And now those cases are moving forward. So, and then there's other people where the cases are just ready to go in real quick order, where you have to get things on file. So part of it is that. But I like to start off with, most cases start off relatively, not in the middle of a battle. So there's time. And I try to, one, gather up the information that's important. So I provide people with a list of documents and other information that I need to help analyze their case. And that often leads to either needing to do a lot more digging to get vital information that we will need to either analyze the case and determine what a reasonable settlement is, or get it to a trial. And in other cases, people have virtually everything you need to get a decent idea of what's going on. So, conversation and asking for information and documents are, generally first stage tasks, including what we were just talking about, prioritizing. And, certainly the clients have to convey what they want and need. But it's also the attorney's job. A good attorney has to sit there and help them figure that out. And that's an early stage process, at least in my approach.
Right.
Of course, strategizing and a plan in a divorce case, which often lasts more than a year, sometimes a few years, right, it is a moving target. So you have to reevaluate from time to time. But, I want to know what the facts are and what a client wants. And then I sit down with them. That could be literally, figuratively. And we go through, what it's going to take to accomplish that task.
Right.
And, and budget for that too, because almost even very wealthy people don't want to have an unlimited budget on their case. So if somebody they say, this is important to me, and then you explain to them, a couple different things. One, it's probably going to take X amount of time, which might be longer than they want. Two, it's going to take X amount of money. And three, these are the, you got maybe a 50-50 chance, or maybe you have an 80% chance of getting what you want. I mean, the likelihood of success coupled with the cost is going to help people to decide whether, well, let's put that on the back burner. Let's go for this and this and this.
And I will say priorities do change. One of the things I also work a lot with priorities and understanding, but, I think it's also important for sometimes the clients to think, what is my spouse's priority as well? Because there, sometimes where those hard discussions are going to be, or what you can give up in order to get more of what you want. But the other thing, as you said, this is not a 6-week process, right? I've seen them be 6 and 7 years. And priorities do change. Maybe you were a stay-at-home parent and now you're back in the workforce. As a stay-at-home parent, you probably got more concern around, am I going to make it financially, than being out in the workforce and bringing money in. That might change somewhat. So always communicate. And if they do change, that's fine. Just let them know. They shouldn't be changing every week, but they do change. The other thing that I think is important is sometimes I've had clients say, I'm not sure if I should tell you this. Tell us this. Because from a professional perspective, all of a sudden the direct deposit went to a new account. That might not seem like much to a client, but if you're thinking there's hidden assets, that could be a major trigger for something like that. So these are some of the things. So communicate, let them understand, let them know how to be your advocate. All of these things that you've been mentioning is so important. And I think sometimes they have a feeling there's something going on and sometimes they don't. And that's another reason I think it's so important that they communicate, because we'll get into this a little later, but I'm sure there are things that you're listening for. But before we even get to that, I think one of the other big pieces of a divorce process that's not very well understood is the discovery process, and how crucial that is to the process, how it's misunderstood. And I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that. What is discovery? Why is it important? What happens if somebody doesn't comply? These are all questions that people should understand.
For sure. It's a process that is a little complex, and it's fairly unknown to clients. I will preface this by saying, I practice in the Chicagoland area in the state of Illinois. So our laws might be different than other states, but all cases have a discovery process. Generally speaking, a civil case and a divorce is a civil case. Civil cases are everything but criminal, have broader discovery processes than, say, criminal cases. And, real simply stated, the discovery process is court-approved things that you can do to gather information and documents to help support your case. a divorce case and all other civil cases are not like you see on TV. They're not like, oh my God, this is all a surprise witness, a surprise document, the smoking gun. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, there are rare circumstances where something new pops up at at a vital moment, but that's generally not what happens. The whole goal of the discovery process is to gather up the information and documentation you need to first try to settle your case, because without information, without documents, you can't determine what is a reasonable resolution for your client. And if you can't settle, it's what you need to go to trial. And like I said, trial isn't just surprise. It's really the orderly presentation of information by both sides to a judge. So the judge hasn't seen any of this information until you get to the trial. But both sides usually are going to see every piece of information in advance that is going to be presented to a judge. And they will have had the opportunity to question it, examine it, vet it, and break it down. So, what are the common tools you ask about discovery? There's quite a few of them, and you may not use them all in every case. In fact, in some cases, you might use none of them. People might have a pretty good handle on what the information and documentation is. And of course, discovery is generally, in divorce cases, is geared towards two major areas. One would be things related to your children, like parenting time and parenting decision-making responsibilities, and the other is financial. And the financials can include child-related financial issues too. So in most cases, we start off with what we call written discovery, which usually includes two different requests. One is a series of written questions that we're asking the other side to answer under oath. And the next is a request for documents that are specific to each particular case. If there's a business, we're asking for all kinds of business records, corporate tax returns, financial statements, loan applications, bank statements. It's a very, very broad list. On the personal side, we're asking for the same thing: tax returns, credit card statements, banking statements, house documents, retirement account statements. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, a typical request for documents could be 10 to 20 pages with 30 to 80 different requests. Again, tailored to every particular case. Once we get that information, we can make an assessment of how reliable it is and how inclusive it is. And then that's usually with input from a client. Does the client accept what has been given to us as complete, accurate? And, in some cases, the clients are like, that's fine, let's accept that. In other cases, the clients are like, I just don't know. And then there's another set of cases where, we look at the documents and we go, this is wholly inadequate. I've got a case, just working on it before we logged into this session here. And, I represent the wife, and the husband has been running a business that brings in multi-millions of dollars. And the husband's claiming he makes a couple thousand at most a month. And in the discovery process, he's delivered almost nothing related to his business. So we're going to have to, we don't take that as accurate. We don't take it as a complete discovery dump. So what do we do in cases like that, where we have to go beyond this initial stage, and we have to issue subpoenas to banks and lenders and to credit card companies and to people that have contracts with the company. Sometimes we have to take depositions, which is questioning either the other party or some witness, some employer, some employee, some paramour, whatever the case may be. We have to question that person under oath with a series of questions and presenting them some of the information, the documents that we've retrieved through discovery. And those depositions also, besides getting somebody's statement or trying to get it to lead us to somewhere else, there's a court reporter always present in a deposition, and they're taking everything down. So we're also nailing down their testimony.
Right.
Because testimony can change and people can change their stories. And if they do, you need a record of, this is what you said before. Now you're saying something different. So the written discovery process, depositions, subpoenas, those are, some of the most common tools that we use in the discovery process.
So I will say that there's a lot of gathering of information, and sometimes as a client you might feel like I don't want to be a pain and ask for more. Inevitably there's more. It's rare that you get everything all up front and everyone's happy. And when your attorney or your financial professional says we need more depth on this, for example, the one that I look at a lot, or one of the many that I look at, is the tax return. And when they only give the 1040, that those first 2 pages of a tax return, there's so much information that you are not seeing that is relevant. Where's the interest coming from? Where the dividends coming from? If they have a business, I actually had a client literally that had 3 businesses and the wife only knew about one. The wife was my client. When we got the full tax return with 3 Schedule Cs, all of a sudden there was a different picture. We looked at financial documents, like you said, from the business, and there was a $300,000 loan to shareholder, being the only shareholder. That wasn't, so it is a process that doesn't happen all in one shot, but trust your professional to guide you through it, because they really do understand certain things are just not enough. As you were saying, it doesn't sit right. We need a little bit more depth. So I think all of what you've said is just incredibly important. And also understanding what all of those documents are that come in, you may not understand as a client, but your professional, your attorney knows what they're looking for, especially in the way of hidden assets. And when we come back, we're going to really get back into that. But right now we do have to take a break. But before that, Michael, how can people get in touch with you?
People could just email me at mcraven@harrisonheld.com. That's MC as in cat, RAVEN @harrisonheld, HARRISONHELD.com. And I'd be happy to answer people's questions.
Fantastic. We'll be right back.
Divorced and become involved in the family court system, there are no winners. Everybody loses, especially the children. I know, because my custody battle lasted years, was completely unnecessary, and financially devastating. That experience inspired SplitSmart. SplitSmart is designed to empower both parents by giving them the structure they need to stay on course for a more peaceful and respectful co-parenting future. For less than amicable couples, our unique line-item negotiation approach helps soften sometimes emotional stances into child-centered agreements that both parents can live with. Do you want your children to thrive and grow up with healthy, loving relationships with both parents? How much easier would it be if you could bypass the conflict and create a clear, supportive, and comprehensive co-parenting plan and schedule that's tailored specifically for your family? Can you imagine what it would be like if there were no arguments about money or child support? If any of this appeals to you, if you want to minimize the expense and drama of divorce, do yourself and your children a big favor and use SplitSmart to craft your co-parenting and support plans. And as an added benefit, even if you've done your best and still can't get all the way there, SplitSmart will have your information well organized, so a skilled mediator or family lawyer can efficiently help your family cross the finish line. Visit splitsmart.com today to get started on creating a brighter and more joyous tomorrow for you and your kids.
Hello, it looks like we're having a little bit of technical problems. We hope that we'll get this cleared up. It seems like there we go. I think we've got it cleared up. We'll be right back with the Financial Wellness Hour with Hersh Sherman. Just one moment.
Hi, I apologize for that. We are back and all sound and video is going. I appreciate that. So sorry, we are on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I am here with Michael Graven from Harrison & Held, a divorce attorney. We have been discussing how to find the hidden assets or discover if there are hidden assets. And we've covered a lot of things, the divorce process, a little bit as to how to get it started, setting priorities, communicating with your attorney, being able to understand a little bit more about your role as a client and really what the role of your attorney is. And if you're not sure, speak to your attorney and make sure you do understand. That is part of the client's responsibility. A big piece at the beginning is going to be the discovery process. And we spoke quite in depth about that and what it is, what is looked for, what is gathered, and how it is not a one-time quick process. Sometimes it goes on for weeks and even a couple months. And with that, we're going to start jumping even more into looking at how to find hidden assets. So the first question really is, sometimes a client has a feeling, I think there's something just not being declared, or there used to be more assets. It looks like the bank account's been going down. So let's say a client believes there are assets being hidden. What is the best way to communicate this feeling to their attorney?
Well, I think you just, mentioned those kinds of things that you were talking about. It often comes out organically anyways in conversations, because when we're gathering the information, we have it and we're looking through it. We're talking about what we have, what we don't have, what we've seen from it, and that leads to conversations. I think, but if somebody actually has a suspicion, they just should just say it. I mean, it's like, I don't know where all our money went. I mean, that's if you had money and now it's gone, right. You've got to ask about it. But a lot of people don't know, or they just have a suspicion, especially when it comes to things that might have been separate. For example, I get a lot of people telling me, well, I know my husband's mother died 3 years ago, and I think my husband got money from that. But the husband's never really shared any information about it. Well, that's just a feeling. They don't know, and
right.
They really need to tell us. Of course, I'm going to always ask about that. Is there anything, did anybody receive an inheritance? Did anybody die recently? Are you expecting somebody to die? All of those kinds of things that would lead to that particular question. But, I really do think the clients have a responsibility on this area. But this is one area where, the lawyer probably is at least equally responsible for helping to identify different areas that are important, and they really need to help bring it out. It's just sometimes people, even when you ask them, they don't get it, or they're for some reason reluctant to talk about it. You even get things such as, I I don't know, I didn't want you to spend time and money on that. But, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time and money to just have an idea, float it out there, and kind of determining whether, okay, it is worthwhile or it isn't worthwhile of examining.
You know, I think something you said earlier as well, and it comes back a lot to the communication and really helping your attorney help you. You need to tell the full story. That comment just alone sounds innocent. I don't know where all the money went. And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, he's not saying that there's a bonus this year, whatever it might be. These are red flags often that come up that, you know, as a client, I've been with somebody 10 years, 20 years, sometimes even 30 plus years. I've always trusted them. It's hard for me in a flash not to trust them. You know, sometimes we are overly trusting in some of these situations. So I think being able to really talk it out and share those things, whether it's the concerns of, you know, moving it forward, whether it's things like, where did that money go? Whether it's things like he's worked at the same company for, you know, 20 years or she's been there for 30 years. I don't understand how there's no money in the retirement account, you know, things like that. Communicate. It's important. There are a lot of things that your attorney is listening for that you may not be aware of. And that's part of your responsibility, obviously, as the client in moving forward and raising those red flags that your attorney can say, here's my impression. Does that sit well? Does it not sit well, kind of thing? But I do think that that conversation that you have up front becomes such an important piece of declaring or understanding whether everything has been declared through discovery and being able to watch for things as it comes in.
There's another thing I find interesting often, Hirsch, in cases. And so if you're anybody listening, and you're just even considering that you might be getting divorced, or you're realizing your relationship isn't going well, and I don't know if you have this experience, but so many people tell me, I didn't look at the tax return when I signed it. You know, I don't know what's on there. And especially in today's world with electronic filing, you know, people aren't necessarily looking at it. So I think one of your jobs, if you are somebody who's not yet in a divorce, or you are actually in a divorce and it's time, you know, a lot of people will file tax returns for 2021 still through October 15th. You know, look at that return and get an idea of what's going on. You know, so because there's a lot of information, like you just said that. I mean, those tax returns are one of my primary source of information, and I was like laughing because I have tailored my requests to clients, my written requests, because so many people did just send the first 2 pages of a 1040. So, you know, my request is send the entire tax return, all schedules, you know, that were attached to it, all schedules that weren't, such as K1s, and, you know, get everything. But, you know, you have to protect yourself, and you have to look and see things. So, you know, but it really does come down to looking at documents and conversations, because, you know, a lot of my clients, one spouse is running a business that's a closely held business. And I have so many clients that, you know, just tell me, well, you know, I have nothing to do with the business. I have no idea, but, you know, they were happily married, so they don't question anything for a good chunk of years. And they're, you know, the beneficiaries of living a decent lifestyle, but they don't know if it's all been accounted for. But, you know, that's the lawyer listening and going, okay, here's a closely held business that my client isn't involved in. I better really, you know, ask some questions about that.
You know, and one of the things I love is how I've had a client, and this is probably 2 months ago, came to me and said, oh, he's been struggling for years in the business. And I looked at and, you know, basically was bringing, I don't know, 60 or 70,000 home on a multi-million-dollar top line business of income. And when I realized what was going on, they were throwing about $80,000 to $100,000 of household expenses through the business, claiming them as business expenses alone, right? So that $60,000 or $70,000 is now $160,000, $170,000. A very big difference when it comes to looking at things like maintenance, what used to be called alimony, at child support, at the ability to, you know, live, and Or somebody will say, I don't understand. He's always going on vacation, but his salary is, $60,000. If they look like they're living beyond their means, there's a couple things going on. One is the debt should be going up. One is their assets should be going down, or they're not telling the truth. Or a combination maybe of those, but basically there are things like that are huge red flags for an attorney or a financial professional that when they're looking at things, they're looking at it with a different lens, I think, as well. So
right.
In general, who are the professionals that should be engaged, and what are the things that you look at?
So it is often important to put together a team of different professionals, and some of it depends upon who your client is. And so, but it's good to have accountants involved in cases. If you're talking about one of the spouses who is less savvy about the finances, both being aware of it and how they work, you actually, it's nice if you could help build a team for that type of client. So they're going to need probably new advisors after the divorce, maybe even during the divorce, for a multitude of reasons. Often they, the financial advisors that are in place are generally more aligned with the person who's actively making the money, actively managing the money. So you need people that are going to help you determine whether this settlement is actually going to make any sense for you. Can you live? Now, of course, a lot of that is dependent upon the facts of the case. If you're dealing with a 33-year-old person, well, they have a lot of time to build money. If you're dealing with a 60-year-old person who hasn't worked in 30 years,
right,
and this is probably their last big financial transaction, and I'm going to phrase their divorce as a financial transaction, it behooves them to take it extremely seriously. One of the problems I run up against is people are just so tired. We've already talked about these cases could be many, many years, and they feel so drained emotionally. They feel so drained financially that they just want it over. So somebody like you who can map things out for them and go, I know you want to be done, but your money's going to run out in about 7 years, or you're going to have a, cash inflow of $70,000 a year, but you've been living on $120,000.
Right.
How are you going to bridge that gap? I mean, you need people like that. So you need, people who can actually just map out what your financial future looks like, financial planners and that sort of thing. You probably need a new accountant. You probably, need a new broker. Every case is a little different, but those are some of the important financial people you need.
Yeah, I had a client, actually, it's funny you bring that up, that literally said to me, I'm going to come out with about 900,000. That's pretty good, right? And I said, I don't know. And she looked at me like, wait, you're the finance guy, right? And I said, well, I don't know what your budget is. If you spend $200,000 a year, you got less than 5 years of a runway with that money. If you spend $50,000 or $60,000, you've got 13 or 14 years, or maybe a little bit more, depending. So it really does, and it comes back to your situation is unique, and it's nice to hear what others have to say and get support from others. But you got to understand that their situation is not always the same as yours. It's your situation, and you kind of get one go at this, So it is important that you get it right and you do it right. And one of the favorite things that I say to my clients is, especially when they say, I just want this to be over, is this is not the last chapter in this part of your life. It's the first chapter in the rest of your life. The way you go through your divorce and how it settles financially, co-parenting, and more, it's really the first chapter in the rest of your life and how your life's going to go from there. And those are important pieces, I think, for people to remember. So
right. And a lot of this cannot be redone. I mean, I have people telling me all the time, well, we can, we'll come back, and there are situations that certain things can be modified in the future, but there's no guarantee of the result. Not everything can be modified, and you can't move forward based upon a maybe. You're doing a deal, you know, it's pretty much there, and you've got to deal with it, and you can't. I mean, sometimes you have to give in something. Obviously, every case, you know, you have to compromise, but you have to also look out for yourself and make sure that this deal makes sense. You know, I'm not advocating take everything to trial or get the most you can in every situation, but, you know, properly analyze with the help of the right people.
Right.
Is this deal making sense for me?
You know, and something that you bring up that is, it's a big piece for me is that the statistic is about 70% of families, of households, do not have a budget. And I do budgets a little differently, and I call it a divorce budget exactly for what you've just said. The first thing that we build is only the essential spend that you need in your life. And then we add the discretionary spend, because it's so important to know where your starting point is. But even more important, you need to know where you cannot go below. And you want to build a buffer into that, right? I'm just picking a number. If you spend $10,000 a month, you don't want to come in at $10,000 a month because there's an emergency here, there's an unexpected expense there. But it really helps part of that strategy. If you know what your priorities are, you know what your minimum threshold of what you can accept is, you know where you want to start, you know what your spouse's priorities are, and you have a competent team that's going to set and be kind of do a little bit of reality testing with you. I think you've got so much already within the process that coming into that office that first day was missing, and often don't even know where to go or what to do. So I think keeping those tools and the right people in your life becomes such a strong piece of being able to move it forward. Unfortunately, we got to wrap this up. I am going to have you on the show because I have plenty more to ask you about. But I'm going to ask any last thoughts before we wrap up. And then once again, how can people get in touch with you, Michael?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. So just wrapping up, a few tips. I mean, one, stay involved in your case, always prioritize. Information is power. So, get information from the internet, from professionals, from wherever. However, I caution you that, unless you're getting it from a professional, you've got to really be careful. Your best friend's divorce, what happened and played out there isn't really going to necessarily be relevant to you. But, there are organizations out there that help people, not-for-profits, that help people understand the process and get used to it. And, surround yourself with people that are positive during a divorce, exercise and eat well and just stay, connected, but always advocate for yourself and do not accept, everything that your lawyer says as gospel, that you have to do it. Question and, look out for yourself, basically.
Agree with all of that. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, your experience. I know that you have had some pretty dragged down cases that you have definitely helped people come out better on the other side, which is always wonderful. I am Hirsch Sermon, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That is lifecycle.financial. You can ask me questions, or if you need to try to get in touch with Michael Graven, our guest today, or want more questions asked of him, please reach out. CC Schatz, my producer, thank you for making the magic happen behind the scene. Michael, I will have to have you back, and I appreciate you being on the show. Have a great week, everybody.